What is the dumbest reason why someone at your workplace got fired? Guy tried to hit on the girl that helped us clean up after closing time by inviting her to the back. For some fun times, just me and you, baby. Girl was the daughter of the owner. Story 2. A coworker infested the office with fleas, but he didn't get fired until he did it. Asterisk a second time asterisk. The first time it happened, the boss closed down the office and had an exterminator come in and told the guy, "Here's a laptop. You telecommute now." It turned out he lived in a trailer with over a dozen stray cats. He kept taking in these strays and just not doing anything for them. No shots, no flea treatments, not even a bath. So pretty soon, the whole place was infested with fleas. He just didn't realize how bad it was because he was on some cocktail of medications that made him smell odd. Apparently, the smell made the fleas not want to bite him. They just got in his clothes, and he carried them to work. After a few days, he was already complaining to my boss that the laptop didn't work right. My boss tried to send me to this guy's trailer to fix whatever was wrong, but I said I would rather quit than set foot in Fleapalooza 2012. So he told my coworker to just deal with it himself. A couple weeks later, the guy came into the office to pick up his paycheck. In the 30 seconds he was inside, he infested the place. After that, everyone threw a fit. The boss only fired the guy to avoid a full-scale revolt. Story 3. New office assistant was asked to drop some laptops off at FedEx to be shipped. Come to find out, she literally just walked in, saw the line was too long, and just left them on the counter. She expected FedEx to know what to do with them. We have no idea what happened to them. They decided to keep her, which was a mistake because she ended up emailing all of our competitors highly sensitive information by mistake. Story 4. Had a coworker who had a princess mentality. She thought she could do whatever she wanted one day and decided to test the waters. She decided to start leaving early without clocking out. The first 1 or 2 times, people were fine doing it for her because maybe she was forgetful. However, she'd leave at 12, 1, and then text someone around 5-6 p to log her out. Then, it became repetitive. Leadership didn't crap. Then one day, she walked into the office kitchen, took someone's lunch out of the fridge, and decided it was hers. She saw it was a sandwich, but wasn't sure what it was, and literally walked up to the very coworker whose lunch she stole and asked him, "Hey, what's in this sandwich?" She didn't know it was his. Lost his damn crap. That's what got her. Asking someone what was in the sandwich she stole. Asking the very person who made that lunch. They finally decided to get her for time clock fraud, too. Story 5. They thought there was 10 inches in a foot and did a bunch of overheight trucking permits wrong. Example, writing 13.6 feet at 13 feet 6 inches, and ended up delaying the shipment of a crane for a critical construction job, which got the entire trucking company blacklisted. Story 6. He punched a guy in the middle of the office. Literally pulled a coworker's pants down in front of the full office. Underpants came along for the ride. The puncher was fired. The pantsy was off work for 6 weeks due to distress. Story 7. Dude I worked with at an outdoor retail store lit off a can of bear spray indoors during business hours. I wasn't there at the time, but as the outdoor supervisor, I got called in to deal with the mess. Thankfully, the idiot fired it into a corner behind the gear counter, so he mostly got himself. However, bear spray comes out in a kind of dense fog, unlike regular pepper spray that comes out in a stream. The whole store had to be evacuated, and it took like 4 bottles of neutralizer to get the carpet clean again. Dumb claimed he dropped it by accident, but the security camera showed him very clearly popping the safety and hitting the thumb trigger. During his out-processing, the GM and I showed him the video and asked what was actually going through his head. He said, "I wanted to see how bad it was. It was really bad. The intrusive thoughts won, I guess." Last I heard, the dummy had bought a tow truck and started a towing business. Story 8. Had a friend call in for him. Mike got run over by a car. He's pass. The next day when I fired him, he demanded his last check. I told him we would send it to the next of kin. Story 9. I worked at Dollar General. Pretty hard to get fired there. My coworker got caught selling crack to customers. They just nicely asked him not to anymore. Half my coworkers were drunk or high. If you get fired from Dollar General, you really ducked up. Story 10. He just didn't log into work. It was a remote job. He was new. We weren't expecting a lot of him, but he wouldn't log in or respond to Teams messages asking how he was doing in an entire day. Honestly, pretty stupid like. You don't even have to go to work. Story 11. I have a few from people I worked with. One guy stood at the bottom of the stairs and pretended he was fiddling with his phone, but was trying to get upskirt pictures of the women walking down. A woman coming down the stairs saw what he was doing and called security. That was a weird HR experience. The guy, who in previous interactions seemed pretty normal, was creepy. Only time while I was there that we had to follow threat procedures. Didn't have to worry about him very long, though, because the cops found a lot of those types of videos on his personal computer and apparently some CP, so he got locked up. I had to fire a woman because she would not stop trying to get the people who reported to her to buy her kids' school fundraiser items. It was against company policy for managers to directly solicit, but there was a way to have an admin post thing so that it was blinded. That way people didn't feel pressured to purchase things from the person responsible for their compensation increases and bonuses. There was a front desk admin at this one place where I worked, who was generally unpleasant but very good at her job, so that wasn't enough to let her go. A data analyst who was on maternity leave came into the office with her baby. We all gathered near the front because it was a quick visit. I asked the data analyst how her husband was doing. Poor guy was in a car accident the week before, and the admin went off for 5 minutes about how could anyone ask about her husband when it was the woman who did all the work and had to carry the baby and breastfeed and stay up all night when it cried. When she tired out, the CFO looked at the head of HR and said, "How about now?" Admin was gone within the hour. Story 12. I work for the Canada Revenue Agency, and we are instructed to never look at our own file upon being hired and told in no uncertain terms that it will be immediately flagged and would be the end of your career, at least once a year around tax season. I will get a memo reminding us of this because several people looked up their own file. Plugging your phone into your computer is also a big no-no because it can store information or compromise the network. I get yearly reminders about that too. I once watched a coworker plug her phone in. I told her to take it out, but it was too late, and she was escorted out within the hour. Story 13. My immediate supervisor planned a European vacation with her girlfriend for a year. Got time off in writing, paid out $12,000 in advance deposits, etc. 2 days before she was supposed to leave, the big boss said he was going on vacation, and she had to skip her European fully paid trip. She went anyway and got fired for it. Story 14. She already had a few trips to HR and then got moved to another department at another site. She went out to her car to go to lunch, then came back into the office. She then claimed someone put a note on her car in the parking lot that read, "Get out of town, idiot." Hands note to supervisor. She got loud in the office area, started to list off names of who she suspected, and everyone heard what was going on. HR pulls her into a meeting later that afternoon and says, "We had security pull the video recording of the parking lot for the first 4 hours of the day. Do you wish to change your story?" She was let go immediately. Story 15. He took a turn too fast on the fork truck. Got 2 wheels lifted off the ground. Supervisor told him to cut it out and drive safe. Safe? Safe? Nothing in this place is safe. And then he spent 20 minutes running around the plant floor tripping alarms and setting off the emergency air horns to prove that none of it worked. All of it worked. He finally left when the super threatened to call the cops. Everyone was real confused about his outburst until we found the half-empty bottle of tequila out behind the dumpster. Story 16. I saw someone get let go because they didn't have a good attitude. For context, myself and a few other people had just been hired for an entry-level accounting job. Those first few weeks, months were rough. The CFO had a tendency of greeting newer people without telling them who he was. One would never expect this guy to be in C-suite by the way he dressed. He didn't even have a LinkedIn profile, so unless one dug around, it was hard to figure out who he was. Anyways, he stopped by our pod and greeted us, asked us how we were doing. One guy made the mistake of being honest and said that he was tired, and not in a cheery way. I didn't blame him. We were all tired. The next day, this guy was let go. I overheard later from a gossiping supervisor that the CFO hated bad attitude and made it a point to remove them from the company whenever possible. Since then, I have been extra guarded about how I respond to questions whenever I join a new company until I learn who to trust. Story 17. A male coworker hid under a coworker's desk first thing in the morning. Unfortunately for him, he didn't realize a desk swap had happened the day before. Woman sits down on the chair, and that's when he chose to scare her. She injured her abdominal area on the underside of the desk. She moved to that desk to be closer to the washroom. Instead, she went on sick because of the resulting injury. Trauma. Story 18. I work at a factory. We use a temporary worker system where a separate agency will do the hiring process. They work at the factory, and usually if they show up and do a passable job, they get hired. The bar is low for a reason, though. We had these 2 utility workers get into some kind of sports-related argument on the line one day. One is temp. One is not. They start to get loud enough that people are looking around corners to see what's up. Temp guy does a thing where it looks like he is doing an exercise to touch his toes and pulls a knife out of his shoes. He sends the people nearest to him running in panic as he attacks the other utility guy. Knifey gets pulled to the ground and disarmed. Cops get called, but he runs away before they show up. Immediately fired, and I never found out honestly if he was arrested or not. The guy who was attacked almost lost his job anyway because of a bullcrap. No tolerance policy. Story 19. I just heard that a guy at my company was fired on the spot when he was caught with a stack of other employees' badges. He was badging each one in at the door, so the other people didn't have to come into the office that day. Story 20. We have a machine shop and had just hired a new machinist. On his second day, he stole a bar of metal at the end of his shift. When confronted about it, he said he sold it for scrap. The scrap value of the bar was less than he made per hour. Story 21. drunk driving their company service vehicle over 100 miles per hour at 1 a.m. from a bar. Video showed them weaving all over the place. Thank goodness they didn't hit someone. Story 22. A lady lost her wallet and someone turned it in. When she picked it up from security, she noticed $200 was missing from the wallet. Security replayed the camera videos, and a security guard that found the wallet had taken the money out and pocketed it. This was Simone Biles' mom. This happened to an employee dropped his wallet outside of the cafeteria doors, and a security guard watched on camera. Another employee finding the wallet a bit later and taking money out of the wallet and walking away. A bank teller, previous coworker, was faking referrals to bankers by saying she spoke to clients about getting them to sit with a banker to open savings accounts, credit cards, etc., when the clients were just considered walk-in. An overnight manager did not know her drawer was going to be audited the following morning and left work with $300 from her drawer. Management still needed to do the audit, and she did not return the money in time. Story 23. Worked at a place that rotated new staff constantly. Here's a few I saw get sacked. 1. Fly tipped his rubbish from a job install, whole van load, down a country lane. Left all information on all the boxes, then claimed he took it to the recycling place, but they followed him and dumped it down a country lane. He was on a tracked van and drove down the lane it was found at. 2. Crashed the forklift into the warehouse door, complained he was too hot and couldn't cope, then started punching himself, left, and never came back. 3. Sat down and watched Jeremy Kyle in the staff room every day for 2 weeks, didn't do any work, and was sacked. 4. Wouldn't do any work, sat there eating food from the breakfast van every day, and destroyed his desk by drilling holes into it or stabbing screwdrivers through it. 5. Stole a stupid amount of Logitech equipment from the warehouse, posted it only on eBay with his skate in the background that had his name written. On then claimed it wasn't him, stole around $40,000 worth of equipment. 6. Walked up to a female member of staff, put his rear end basically on her arm and farted, didn't want to do any work, and was sacked after 1 day. 7. Attended site after doing CK the night before, was substances tested and failed obvious. Staff said if you don't want to fail the test, then walk out, but he did it anyway. 8. Walked in and quit instantly with no notice. Pissed into the back of his van over all the stock that had to be binned. Used to piss into his van a lot, so there was jellified piss all over the place. 9. General manager new to the company walked in and told all the women they aren't qualified to do their jobs. Sacked instantly. 10. Decided to buy a pumpkin from the shop and try carve it in the office with a knife. Then said to the top manager, "Who are you?" When she asked what he was doing 11, one guy didn't like a woman in his office. She was meant to train under him, made constant complaints about her, and refused to train her while saying, "I don't want a damn woman in my office." Went on for a while with constant arguing, and she was sacked. Found out later on when she came to hand the keys to me with a big smile on her face that they paid her $20,000 not to sue the company. 12. Engineer didn't want to work for the company anymore. Decided to smash his van into the back of an old lady's car, break his laptop and his phone all within a couple of days, then was sacked off. No idea why he didn't just leave. Story 24. I got fired for my first job. I think I was 17. I had called in a few days in advance and left a message on the machine that I wasn't going to make it on Thursday, Friday. They called me and told me I was fired for not showing up and that they didn't get any message. I did eventually get another position at the same place around a year later. Story 25. He brought cough drops into the worksite. Now, this might seem minor, but I work for a company that breeds rodents for laboratory tests. The top concern, after the welfare of our animals, is biosecurity. When I get to work in the morning, I strip completely naked, pass through a timed locking shower, and then dress in sterile clothes provided by the company. The only items we are allowed to bring through the showers with us are prescription eyewear or hearing aid. Any other item, unless specially authorized by management, is an automatic firing. Can't even wear my wedding ring or simple stud earring. I know the dude knew this because they are very clear about it and he'd worked there for years. I guess he just thought if he tucked it behind the spare uniform in his cubby, nobody would know. But our manager happened to come inside that day. He saw the bag, asked whose cubby it was, and that was that. The really sad thing was that this was at the beginning of pandemic. So even if he wasn't sick with COVID, all he had to do was tell management that he had a bad cough, and they would have given him time off with pay until he got better. He threw away a steady, well-paying job in the middle of a pandemic because, I don't know, I guess he was too proud to call out sick. Story 26. I was at a summer camp and 2 teenage boys, like 16 years old, got into a fight. A slightly older, female, camp counselor, maybe 19 or 20 years old, ran to get help breaking up the fight. She was pretty small. The guys were pretty big. She got fired because she left the kids unattended for maybe 45 seconds while she went to get help. Story 27. The place I worked at is famous for its Advantage card. a loyalty card scheme. A guy I worked with fraudulently added 75 pounds worth of points onto his own card using his own till login at our own store. Sometimes we got sent to other stores to cover shifts. It's dumb because it couldn't have been more traceable if he had a big neon ducking sign saying, "I'm committing fraud," whilst certain staff have the power to manually add Advantage card points to a card, any amount greater. Then 20 pounds worth gets flagged to head office automatically. The store manager is then called upon to account for it. This is well known among staff. Dude added 75 pounds in one go. Dude added it to his own card taken out in his own name. Anyone can apply for one of these cards, and you don't need to provide ID or even really valid details. Dude used his own till login to process it all, even if it wasn't fraudulent and wasn't for a silly amount. We cannot add points to our own cards under any circumstance. We have to get another employee to do it. He was arrested, boots counted as theft and prosecuted as a matter of policy, and sacked 2 weeks before Christmas. Story 28. Dude made a coworker uncomfortable by asking her out and not taking no for an answer. She mentioned something to HR in passing, and they jumped on it. He was told to not contact her for any reason until HR can work out what to do. Basically, just over the weekend, he contacts her and got fired on the spot. I talked with him about it after, and he just did not understand what he did wrong. Worst part is, he was planning on showing up to a work event even though he was fired. Thankfully, he at least took my advice to not do that. Story 29. So back when I was 23, I was a manager at a place that was pretty much known for, they'll hire anybody. So it wasn't uncommon for the staff to be a lot of shiny new teenagers just starting out in the workforce. This kid Andrew was like 19. He was a decent enough worker, and he liked me well enough. So he was much better about communicating things to me than to the other managers. That is, rather than just no call, no showing, he'd usually try to let me know. In advance, if he wasn't going to show up for a shift, he knew I'd be managed. Anyway, cue the following conversation. Andrew. Hey, just so you know, I'm probably going to miss work tomorrow. Me. Oh, really? Are you all right? Is everything okay? Andrew. Oh, yeah, no, I'm good. It's just my buddy Tyler got this sick acid and he wanted to trip tomorrow. So, you know, me. Are you telling me that you plan on missing work tomorrow because you will be too busy doing substances? Andrew. I don't know. I was just going to get high. Me. And do you plan to find coverage for your shift? Andrew. No? Why would I do that? Because it is required for unexcused absences? Well, so? Me. So you'll be providing a doctor's note to excuse the absence? Andrew. No? Then please give me another reason. What do you mean? Me. Tell me you are sick. Tell me you've been feeling off all day and your head feels stuffy and you think you might be coming on with something. Andrew. But I feel fine? Or maybe you're coming down with something? Or maybe everything is fine now, but you'll unexpectedly be met with an emergency later tonight that'll force you to miss work. Anything? Andrew. No. I was just going to hang out with my buddy Tyler. I really, truly was trying to give this kid the benefit of the doubt. Give him any and all opportunity to at least give me a BS little cough, cough. I feel sick, cough. But no, he said what he said and he did what he did, so the main manager fired him. And he was so mad afterwards, acting like he had been genuinely wronged or something. Poor guy. Story 30. Worked at a grocery store for my first job. Friend got fired for not taping his receipt to his bottle of water he kept at his register. Manager said it sends the message to customers that employees get free products. Luckily, the manager herself was also fired not long after that for being all around crafty, and our new manager was crazy awesome. Story 31. The company I worked for moved to a new office in a different building. The owners of the building served everyone lunch as a welcome gift. There were several platters of food. At the end of one of my coworkers' shifts, she took a whole platter home with her, without permission. This was before half the staff were able to have any of it. The next day she came in, she was fired. She honestly didn't think she did anything wrong. It was for her kids. Story 32. I have 3. One guy was fired for downloading adult film onto government computers. The masturbating probably didn't help his case either. He worked in a cube farm and didn't even have an office door. The second person did have an office door, but it turns out that they frown on people running another business on the government's time and using the government's computer, copier, and office supplies to do so. The last guy had some issues in his file, but the final straw was that he wouldn't stop going to strip clubs in the government car with government plates. He said that he went to men's clubs for the food, and that the state had no right to tell him where he could or could not eat while he traveled. Turns out that they can control where you park their car. The git probably wouldn't have been fired if he had just given in, parked the car somewhere else, and walked to the men's clubs. Story 33. This was very long ago, but one young kid thought it would be funny to put a hot dog through his pants zipper and showing a waitress his junk with it. She thought it was absurd, but not enough to tell management. Waitress would later tell this story to one of the higher-ups while they were just hanging out outside of work over drinks. The lady didn't take too kindly to the story and decided to pursue it further and got the dude fired. Story 34. Years ago, I worked at a movie theater that had a coffee bar inside. On Thanksgiving one year, a guy working the coffee bar got himself a serving of whipped cream to eat with the Thanksgiving meal we provided for everyone. He was suspended immediately for theft, then fired. Story 35. This company I worked for had a pretty nice little cafeteria in the office building. A very senior manager, think 2 steps from the CEO, would go into the cafeteria every morning, order 2 pancakes at the grill station, then walk out of the cafeteria without paying. This went on for months. The cafeteria manager was told that this was a high-power executive, so the cafeteria manager thought, maybe that's how it works. One day, the CEO goes in for breakfast and stops to pay for his food. The cashier is surprised and says something like, "I thought all the upper managers got free food." CEO, "No, we don't." "What made you think that?" One awkward conversation and an hour of reviewing security footage later, and a man who spent over 20 years building a career in which he was making no less than $400,000 annually, circa 2010, plus big $401,000 contributions, has been fired for stealing pancakes. Story 36. Dude I knew in the Army was supposed to go on leave for a month, so he got high that weekend, but his flight got canceled. Monday morning, there was a mandatory substances test, and he popped hot. Story 37. Most memorable ones. 1. Janitor tried to steal a printer by carrying it out in a black trash bag as trash. The bag ripped, and it fell out in view of many people. 2. Guy plugged in an external HDD to his work computer at work to listen to music, but forgot about the adult film he had on it that was found when it ran a scan on the device. 3. Manager got kicked out for using company phone to pics of his junk while at work to send to some escort and got nudes from her. That was not long after he also got caught in an escort sting wearing company shirt. Story 38. Worked at a frozen food distribution warehouse. Strict rule about eating the product naturally. A guy was once bringing down a pallet of chocolate chips from the top rack and one of the boxes SCD the steel, showering him with frozen product. He and I walked to the soup's office to report, and while I was filling out a witness form, he noticed there was a chocolate chip just sitting there on his shoulder. He ate it. They fired him. He was 6 years in and one of our best workers. Schiffmacher lost all respect from his employees from then on and became the butt of our jokes. Story 39. A coworker of mine called in to say he was sick 1 hour before he was supposed to start his shift. 2 hours later, he is observed at a bar by several employees, where he then takes pictures with them as if nothing has happened. As stupid as it is, he sends these pictures to people who are currently at work. This was, of course, forwarded to the boss the next day. Story 40. Got fired on my day off for saying hi to the girls in the ticket booth. 16, and went in to get my check. Had to walk by the booth to get to the office. One of the girls asked why I was in. Before I could speak, the owner says, "You know the rules." No talking to the girl. "You are fired." Left and had a panic attack on the interstate. 3 days later, the secretary calls and wants to know where I have been. Told her ask the boss. "Well, just come on in." Nope. Story 41. Not quite fired, but I was called in for a disciplinary for turning up a few hours late to work and not letting them know. The reason I was late was because my 3.5-year-old sister had gone missing. We actually found her in the house, hiding inside a small cabinet after 4 hours of despair, police involvement, and frantic searching. Story 42. A guy I worked with had to put away some motors for a power tool. He had to scan the item and then scan the location of where he was putting it. I was booking it in, handed him the bag of motors, and said, "Put these in a box and don't forget to locate it on your scanner." He goes off, comes back a minute later. I ask, "And you've located it so we can find it?" He nods his head, of course. Next day, manager comes out the office as no one can find the motors. We know it was him and point to roughly the area it should be in. The manager finds the box and pulls it off the shelf. A bunch of motors fall through the box and onto his head. The idiot didn't think to cello tape the box together, just folded it and put it on the shelf. The manager goes to first aid, and as it happens, the lad is walking past on his lunch break. We pull him aside and say, "Listen, we know you put the motors away and didn't seal the box. Go to the manager and apologies." He laughs, no, and walks into the canteen to have his lunch. The look me and my coworker made was surprised and, well, he's gone. Come first payday a few days later, that's exactly what happened. And that's not even the weirdest story I have of it. Story 43. Business trip to PA, hit a buck, packaged it on dry ice, and sent it back to the office using the office FedEx account. The delayed parcel arrived, smelly mess. Story 44. Stung by a bee. He wasn't allergic to bees, just lazy and always looking for a way to get out of working. Just so happens he also did a lot of substances. Mandatory substances test with any workplace injury, and he popped positive for the substances and was let go. Story 45. My first job was at a popular chain sandwich shop. Won't say here, but the specific corporation doesn't matter for this story. I was the new guy. It was my first job. I was 18 and in college. Was still figuring out life. I was skinny and weird looking, not confident, and reeked of video game nerd. The ladies I worked with, I was the only male. Didn't like the awkward vibe I gave off or something. IDK. 2 weeks into the job, I got a call from my shift leader every day saying they weren't busy and didn't need me to come in. It was my finals week, so I was fine with being called off for study time. At the end of that week, I went in for a shift and my manager fired me on the spot. When I asked why, she said I'd been a no-call, no-show the whole week. I didn't fight it at the time because I was more confused than anything. And I really didn't care about that job and was going to quit anyway. For another job I interviewed for that was more in line with what I wanted to do. But I later pieced together that the shift leader would call me off, but then mark me down on the schedule as a no-call, no-show. So I later called the division manager and explained what happened. I even gave them my cell phone record so they could see I received a call every day I was scheduled. Corporate confirmed that the calls came from that location, and the shift leader was the only supervisor on duty at those times. So the shift leader wound up getting crap canned. She hardly ever said more than 2 words to me the entire 3 weeks I worked there, but for some reason had it in for me. She'd been at the company for over 2 years and threw it all away just to make the new guy look bad instead of having an actual conversation with. Story 46. Dude shows up drunk as a duck. Coworker is working in a bucket lift, and the drunk guy decides to prank him by removing key, way out of line even by our standards. Drunk guy then proceeds to break the key off in the machine while trying to turn it back on. He was surprised he got fired. Other story, dude ran from the cops after getting pulled over on his way to work. Obviously, they pursued his vehicle. He tried to hide in the job site. End clients were on site and less than impressed. He was also a bit surprised after being relieved from his duties. Story 47. This isn't a funny one, but it's still a dumb reason. I don't work there anymore and luckily found something better. A place I used to work for had a pretty toxic work environment. A lot of nepotism, good old boys club stuff going on, and a lot of type of personalities. Along the lines of, what do you mean you don't watch football? What are you, a heck? Kind of crap. It was a pain in the ass to get hired if you don't have family or friends there as well. The pay, retirement, and benefits were great though. Well, I remember this dude got hired that was in his early 28s. Kind of quiet, but a nice guy. He also knew his crap too, and was a great worker. The thing is, he didn't fit in there with the workers. At first, it was just small, friendly ball busting, but then people just flat out bullying him. High school type crap, but grown adults. He started just disappearing on his breaks and lunch, and I didn't blame him. They ended up firing him for some bullcrap reason. It all boiled down to they thought he was weird. It was ducked up. I heard he's doing well, though. Story 48. Worked at a small business, so there weren't many employees. Firings, but the ones that happened stood out. Very early on, there was a guy working there, in his 30s, I think. And one day, out of the blue, he told the boss, "Hey, I'm going to go on vacation. Not sure how long or when I'll be back, probably over 3 months." My boss was a bit shocked and told him his job wouldn't be waiting for him. He asked, "Why not?" I think there's a difference between, "I'll be back in 3 weeks," versus "I may be back at some point." From what I knew, his family had an odd habit of just up and leaving really good jobs for no reason. His brother was a groundskeeper at a gold course and got a free house as well as pay, and just quit one day and had to find housing for himself and his elderly mother. Another girl would sleep on the job, but not in a subtle way or a little over lunch. She would go to the boss's office when she wasn't there, lie splayed on the floor, and start snoring. The office had no door and was open to the main work area of the shop, so you could hear her snoring. The first time or two, the other staff thought she must be super tired or on medication. But then it became a problem every shift when she would sleep for hours on end, sometimes as the person in charge. It got to the stage where the boss, who was super understanding, would ask her at the end of the week, "How many hours did you actually work?" and then pay her for those. I think eventually the boss said she needed to sort herself out, and when she didn't, she was fired soon after. Story 49. Shivak Company. He originally got fired because somebody saw him take copper scrap out of the container and put it in his own car. Idiot got fired because he couldn't resist stealing about $40 of copper scrap. Then again, he would be fired sooner or later anyway because, holy crap, was he a mess. He only worked there 3 months, and still, somehow, we were cleaning up his messes several months after he was fired. Everything from installs failing after a few months to customers being understandably pissed when they got the bill because he had promised them a ridiculously low price to one case. Where we had no record of him ever installing a unit because, as it turns out, he stole it from the warehouse and pocketed a cash payment. Story 50. I worked in an advertising agency as a digital designer in 2010 in NYC, and this upper-level director who was ducking the wife of the CEO pulled his junk out and peed on him and his wife during a XMS party in front of the entire staff and guests. I was actually pretty epic, and the Monday morning meeting following it was very hard to not laugh. Story 51. Back when I worked at Burger King, we would take the bucket opener, a metal pry bar type tool, and bang the crap out of the freezer door when we were frustrated. The door looked like a golf ball with dimples all over it from the hits with the tool. One day I came in and we had a brand new freezer door installed. The area VP Big Shot had come in to oversee the installation, so he was hanging around for the day. Well, Dave comes in for his shift and sees the brand new, shiny and smooth door and says, "This won't do at all," as he picks up the bucket opener and proceeds to smash the duck out of the door. The VP sees this and just starts screaming, "What the duck are you doing? You're done, get out!" Dave looks at me, says, "See you around," and walks out the door. Story 52. I worked at a Sonic, and we had a new policy: no leggings. They hung up signs around about it, texted the group chat, the whole nine. They did this for 2 weeks. A coworker came in with leggings and refused to go home and change or use the spare pants one of my coworkers kept in the car. She was fired. Story 53. Company put everyone up in a nearby hotel during inclement weather. Guy, I only kind of knew, never worked with directly, got drunk and threw his room's balcony furniture off the balcony. Balcony was inside, overlooking an atrium. He's pretty lucky no one was seriously injured, but also a dumb crap for even doing it at all, drunken state or not. It was pretty easy for the cops to figure out who did it, which means it was easy to track which employee got which room, etc. Story 54. Fun story on this one. I was working as a swing shift engineer, supervisor, quality control, design engineer at a small town factory that made aircraft relays. It was a union shop. The shop steward for second shift had a drinking problem, and I was under strict orders to send him out for a blood test if he came in soused. He was heading for his third strike and instant dismissal. Well, our hero had been drinking heavily all day and forgot to sober up for work. He had also used up all his sick days and vacation days, and he didn't want to get fired. So what did he do? He called in a bomb threat. The desk clerk got the call. "Hello, Hillbilly Factory here. Howdy." Bill, that you? You're late, man." "Yeah, no, it's not me. Look, there's a bomb in the building and I'm gonna blow you all up. Better get out." Click. The clerk reported the conversation had been standing there. Crap. "Okay, call the cops. I will evacuate everyone. You get out to the parking lot when you're off the phone. Machines off, ovens off, torches off. Everyone filed out." Word got around and they were pissed at old Bill. Cops arrived. I volunteered to go sweep the building. No bomb. We were back to work in an hour, and I brought donuts and coffee for everyone and the good old boy. Yeah, he was fired. They had to visit him in jail to tell him. Story 55. True stories that happened to me. I used to work shifts on reception. My hours, this particular week, were 7 a.m. to 2 p.m., with my coworker's shift being 2 p.m. to 7 p.m. One day, he just never turned up, resulting in me having to do a double shift, paid by the hour, so I didn't care. At 13:30 the following day, he phoned me from the pub to say he was a little worse for wear, so he wouldn't be in. At 13:45, the day after, he phoned my boss to say, "Paul, I'm so ducking pissed, I can barely stand. I'll see you tomorrow. Promise." The conversation ended with Paul saying, "James, don't bother coming back. P45's in the post, not someone else." These actually happened to me. An employer made me redundant as my post was. No longer required. Nearing the end of my 4-week notice period, we had a staff Christmas party. The manager had invited my replacement to the night out. Turns out the arsehole had been conducting interviews when I was off duty simply because he hated me. The cheeky git had told my replacement that I was leaving for another job and even had the balls to ask me to train the guy before I left. The manager was told to go forth and multiply. The most ridiculous one, though, I got fired after a colleague reported me for having a picture of a girl set as the screensaver on my personal mobile as cell phone. It was a picture of my wife taken at her 48th birthday party the weekend before. A few very puzzled-looking faces when that was brought up at the unfair dismissal tribunal. Story 56. He was supposed to take several samples of water from several different spots over several days. He took one large sample from one spot and distributed them to several bottles. These samples were all analyzed for specific tracing chemicals. When all samples taken at one specific shift, all came out identical, and it always happened during his shift. Story 57. The place I work often hires through a temp agency. You get a 1-year contract, and when they're hiring permanent positions, those temps are pretty much a shoo-in because they already know the job. So, I was 6 months in, and a couple of permanent positions opened up. Me and 2 other people got them. One of the other guys failed his substances test. Like, dude, what the heck? The whole hiring process was like a month long from apply to take a substances test. Story 58. Tradesman got caught doing cash-in-hand jobs through the company. He would go to the job through call-outs from the company, then do the work cheaper under the table and say the customer wasn't interested. The issue was, he did a fair bit where they were old people who sort of didn't get what. So he did a shoddy job one time. A customer called up yelling and screaming about the work. There was nothing on the system, etc. The boss went out and looked at it, got caught and fired, etc. Hilarious. Story 59. I have 2 good ones. I worked for a city government at the time. One of our inspectors showed up outside of my office when I arrived at work on Monday morning. As a finance manager, I was responsible for overseeing the government credit cards issued to staff. He walks in and sits down and says, "Man, I messed up this weekend. I went to a men's club, paid for an escort, and took her to a hotel for sex, and paid for it all with the city credit card. I logged into the bank's card system, looked his card up, and sure enough, there were 3 charges. But they were all to nondescript merchant name. And except for the motel name, you never would have known what they were for. He could have easily blew them off as accidental personal charges, reimbursed us, and we never would have known otherwise. Inspector got fired. His junk got him fired, too. City cops had a sting going at local motel for prostitution. Going after the Johns this time. Had a real escort go undercover to get her charges dropped in return. Motel owner lets cops use a room for the sting. Spend several hours busting a lot guys. Sting ends. Everyone leaves. One young cop and the escort are last ones left. Motel owner comes to see if room needs cleaning and catches the young cop and escort banging away. Cop got fired. His banana got him fired. Story 60. I used to work at a supermarket, and any expired products that didn't sell, we would have to count, so there's no discrepancies in stock, and then waste. One of the managers used to take the expired meat for his dogs, instead of wasting it, and he was fired over it. This guy usually followed the rules to a T. Since the product was being wasted anyways, I really didn't think he did anything wrong, but apparently it was fireworthy. He'd been there for yonks too, like well over 20 years, in a high position, and they just got rid of him over such a tiny thing. Story 61. Theft. And stupidly easily traceable theft. I was working at a place that did online sales and had company gift cards. We had a couple laying around for testing. One day a guy pulls one out of the drawer and notes it's been redeemed. Oh well. Crappy record keep. Same with the next one and the next one. Now it's suspicious. Look up the account it was redeemed by. All of them the same and not our test account. Pull up customer data. Dude doesn't work for us. Check his Facebook friends. There's a guy that works for us, but not for long. Dude lost a $60,000 a year job with lots of upward mobility over maybe $200 in gift card. Whatever. Story 62. She had a heated disagreement with a coworker whose mother was a VP. Apparently there were other reasons, but everyone knew the catalyst to termination was the argument. Story 63. Guy in the warehouse had a massive drinking problem. Every day, he'd walk 5 miles down the interstate to get to work and 5 miles back home because he lost his license and he didn't have any friends left to give him a ride. I wasn't there, but one office Christmas party, apparently, he showed up already wasted, drank even more, and started saying a bunch of foul-mouthed, filthy crap to the boss's wife. After that, he started mouthing off and saying a bunch of crap to the women who were there with their husbands who all work landscaping and are built like wrecking balls. He came very close to getting the ass beating he deserved. But somebody shoved him into his car and drove him home. He did not come back to work, and we didn't have any office parties for a couple years after that. Story 64. A shipper had been working with our relatively small company for about 3 months. Older, big, rough-looking fellow. But after some early difficulties with accuracy, became quite proficient at his job. Reliable and focused. One day, I arrived at my usual time, about 15 minutes before my official start time, to find my warehouse manager locked in my office, looking rather ragged. This manager was a pretty easygoing person, and I'd never seen him like this. Apparently, when the shipper arrived this morning, the manager said, "Good morning," and was immediately sucker-punched in the face by the shipper. The shipper then went about his duties. The rest of the company had gone into a bit of a lockdown. Since I'd hired the shipper, it was my job to fire him. He outweighed me by at least 50 pounds and was well over 6 feet, so I was careful when I walked up to him to ask how he's feeling and asked what happened. He stated that he was a bit grumpy and didn't know why he punched his supervisor. "Just having a bad day, I guess," were his exact words. I fired him and escorted him off the property. He likely was on some substances because he never had any issues with the warehouse manager. Story 65. So basically, one forklift driver had an accident and tested positive for weed. The manager announced that the company will start doing random testing. My mate went to the manager and literally gave him the whole litany about how he smokes every day, and how it improves his performance, and that it's nothing bad, etc. Needless to say, mate got sacked on the spot. Also, they haven't done a single testing in the next few months that I've been working there after. Story 66. A guy flunked a pee test, then asserted it wasn't his, so he couldn't get fired since it was pee he bought that was dirty and not his. Story 67. We met some kind of milestone, so they bought a crap load of Jimmy John's subs, like 3 boxes full. 1 box for each shift. I worked 3rd shift. I just clocked in and watched these cheeseball walk out with this box full of subs. I thought nothing of it really other than like, that's a lot of subs for one guy. I come to find out that those were our subs. So I ducking told on thee and he got reduced. Story 68. Working the pre-rollout for the latest model of a new jumbo jet by a large American manufacturer. Many NDAs, many no cameras, no cell phones signs all over the event. First thing this Zero does is whip out his phone and take a selfie with the jet. Security was on him like a fat guy on a McNuggets. We all just stood by and watched him get escorted out. New guys. Story 69. Dude spent 8 months reporting procedure violations with photographic proof to management. Not nitpicky crap either. violations that were actively interfering with other people's job, like improper inventory, creating safety risks, and taking things from their designated area so that the next person to use it had to waste time looking for it. When management did duck all to address the problems, dude got fed up and started describing people as useless and other words that hurt people's feelings. He got fired for it. Dude is me. Story 70. A guy said, "Men are men and women are women and women do not belong in the workplace. I'm a woman and I was his lead for the show run a week. He gave me grief all day and he was asked to not come back. Funny, a month later, he was temp on the show I work on full time. He kept talking poorly about me, so someone told him to tell the technical director. He is my ex-husband and could use an excuse to fire me. He really wouldn't. We are still very close friends." The guy was again asked to not come back. Story 71. We had someone come back from a leave who had been moved to a new engagement at their return. They showed up their first day back, logged in, but not on the VPN, and didn't mention they had moved country while on leave. When asked, after their access was locked, they stated they would be returning to the country they were hired to work from and then tried to log in again the next day from the same country. They weren't so much fired, as deactivated for NCNs when they stopped responding to all communication. The moral of the story is that while your hardware can be moved and set up anywhere, it will always have the ability to see its location and shut your access down if the connection is deemed insecure. Be honest about your circumstances and intentions. Maybe it will work. Maybe it won't, but obfuscation will almost always bite you in the backside. Story 72. One of my ex-colleagues was in a car crash on the motorway. When we went through the detail of it, she hadn't realized that her license had expired after she failed to update it. She had been driving company cars with no license and therefore insurance for years. Her response? "I didn't know what it meant. I thought it just renewed." Story 73. Had a new guy in training at the office that seemed really nice. The guy training him went to use the bathroom. When he came back, the trainee was chewing on the handle of his trainer's metal lunchbox like a teething ring and licking the box, not just a nibble. Hard chewing that went on for a few until his trainer snapped out of being stunned. Trainee's reasoning: he wanted to eat it, not the contents, the plastic handle and metal box. Trainer carried that lunchbox for years as a reminder. "How was your day?" His reply: "Well, no one tried to eat my lunchbox today. So yeah, we guess the guy didn't like the job and wanted fired instead of quitting." Story 74. At a biotech facility I worked at a few years ago. Part of the job is going into a large walk-in cooler that holds all of the samples and antibodies that we sell and ship to different schools, laboratories, hospitals, etc. Usually everyone brought in their own jackets because the coolers are actually kind of comfy to be in when you're bundled up properly, but a nightmare if you're not. You get warned many times beforehand, and I honestly loved this job. Had a new guy that quit after working for less than an hour because "I can't do cold," and just walked out. It became a joke for a while that the next time someone gets hired, we need to see if they'll last longer than an hour first. Story 75. I know a guy who got fired like this. After pandemic, the boss mandated that everyone needs to come back to the office. So this guy commutes to the office for this team meeting and is the only physical person in the whole office. 6 other people in his team did not come into the office for this meeting. So the meeting kicks off on Teams, and they all join, and the usual crap is happening at the start of the meeting with people chatting. This guy goes, "I'm glad I came into the office, you guys," and swings his camera around showing the empty office. Boss then cracks it and fires him, the only guy in the team that actually complied with the directive, on the spot. You know what? If you don't like it, just don't come to work at all anymore. You're fired. Story 76. Well, I got fired from Walmart for calling out 3 times in a year. 2 were in a row because my face was swollen and I had to go to the doctor for emergent surgery, and I came back with a doctor's note. Didn't matter though. Story 77. Stole a bunch of money. Kept coming into work high on meth if they turned up at all. Admitted it all to the boss. Boss had a soft spot for people struggling with addiction due to losing a friend to it, so gave him a month off with a bunch of resources and standing offer of any help needed to get his crap together and come back for a fresh start. Took the month, came back high and stole a bunch of money. Annoying thing was, aside from that, he was a real good dude, pleasant to be around, wanted to learn the job and actually put effort in and did well, which is super hard to find in my industry. Usually people we get are horrifically incompetent. God damn it, kid. I was rooting for you. Story 78. Employees dared employee to bite me at the time, 22F fast food assistant manager, to bite my ass. He did. He got fired. He couldn't understand what he did wrong since it was just a joke. Story 79. Employed Sarah to work in a kitchen in a bowling alley, who on her first day became clear she was mentally subnormal. Spent some time doing training, then left her with some basic tasks to do. Went back 10 minutes later to find she'd disappeared. Realized she was actually playing arcade games. The thing was, she had the same dopey. Blank expression, whether you were explaining how not to get burnt in a deep fat fryer, playing arcade games, or being handed her sandwiches in a roadmap. It was difficult to understand how she was managing to human at all. Story 80. My workplace has an extremely strict substances policy, industrial setting, lots of heavy equipment, etc. This one dude was always extremely and obviously high all the time. All day, every day, stunk like a skunk. Bright red eyes, perpetual squint, the works. Would use every break to go get utterly blazed in his car. So one day, a manager passes him in a hall and smells the obvious stank of the devil's lettuce and just stops him and point blank asks him if he's under the influence. Dude confidently said, "Yeah, man, totally, but it's okay. It's legal now, and I have a medical card." Turned out it was not okay, and he was promptly walked out the door on the spot. Story 81. Because she actually did her job and held herself to standards, and so they fired her when she started becoming inconsistent like the remaining staff. Anyways, I stepped in and unfired her, and then fired the a-hole who stood around and flirted all day and accomplished jack crap. Story 82. I remember when I worked at a nonprofit. They fired the guy in charge of all fundraising. There was no one even closely qualified to replace him, and their reason for their firing was he wasn't doing his job in any measurable way, except that he just delivered proof that he did more than what was asked of him the day prior. It was clear they just didn't like him, but he got along great with everyone. Completely screwed the team and our upcoming fundraiser. Story 83. Guitar player was working at McD's and made himself a burger for his lunch break. He added cheese, but didn't ring up the cheese. Manager fired him at the end of the day. Story 84. Stole $5,000 in cash from the casino-cade. For reference, if your float doesn't balance to the cent, you get written up. If it is out more than $5, a full-blown investigation is called. Usually just an error, and a guest might have been short or overpaid. Git thought it was a good idea to drop a $5,000 wrap of $100 and walk out with it tucked in their sock. Except you balance your float before you finish your shift, and it is checked with the supervisor. All employees are aware of the procedures, and the place has more cameras than a bank. Story 85. It didn't happen at my workplace, but I had a high school buddy many years ago who got fired from this bagel shop in an upscale neighborhood because the goober decided that it was a good idea to get high in the shop's walk-in freezer. We had literally made plans to meet up after he got off work and go get high, but he couldn't wait. Quite literally the dumbest reason I ever heard anyone get fired over, and I still chuckle about it whenever I think about it. Story 86. Not me, but a friend. He and another coworker were closing a McDonald's. They asked their manager if they could take the leftover cookies from the display. She said yes. They took the cookies. Next day, one of them got an email saying not to come in because they have proof of him stealing. But they didn't say anything to the other employee. My buddy who got fired happens to be the son of a lawyer. Needless to say, McDonald's managers almost crap a brick when they realized what they potentially just did to themselves, so they hired him back on the spot. Friend went in the next day and quit. Story 87. Not the dumbest, but the craziest. I work as a CNA. One of my ex-coworkers was wiping a resident that has wounds on hospice with bleach wipes on his skin. I reported it to state, management, and social services. She got fired same day and most likely got her license ripped up. Story 88. My ex-boss would fire someone because he said it made him feel better. He also made our new GM pick someone and just fire them because he needed to know what it felt like to fire someone. Yep, he was a pos. Story 89. Admin assistant decided to try to get me fired because I was processing paperwork incorrectly. I'm the sales manager and literally wrote the rules on the process she decided I was doing wrong. Went my boss with it. And after the third time she was told, I make the rules, follow them, the boss gave up and let her go. Didn't help that she was so slow doing literally anything. Half my sales team just did her job for her because it was faster. When my boss finally pulled me in to ask if it would hurt us if he fired her, I just had to tell him it might actually help. Story 90. Customer used an in-store gift card. After the transaction, there was a $1.25 balance on the card. He gave it to the cashier and said, "Buy yourself a soda." The cashier did exactly that and got fired the next day. They said he should have turned the card in. Story 91. Start work at a big accounting firm. Before you go off to your first assignment, there is group national training at a Scottsdale resort where there happens to be big metal horses in a fountain up front. New accountants tend to be fresh college grads, so the managers explain on the first day that this is work. You're to act professionally. And under no circumstances should you try to ride the fountain horse. Someone wannabe cowboy didn't last 24 hours before they were fired and sent home. Story 92. Early internet company. Old-timer with almost no tech skill was given a database management job. He somehow got onto the live server and zapped 500,000 hyperlinks, basically rendering the website unusable. He was promptly escorted from the building. Watching it and management running all over the place was fun. Almost as fun as when we got hit with the love virus. Nothing like archetypal it dude running down the hall screaming to the woman next to me, "Don't open that email." Story 93. I remember a woman who started working at a company the same time as I. She's smart and really on board the whole company's values. About 10 years later, she applied for a management along with others and had a good chance to get it. Unfortunately, when she first started at the company, she said she had an undergraduate degree. For management positions, they verify this type of information and found out she lied. She was terminated immediately. Don't lie on your employment application. Story 94. Coworker called in and said her sister, Candy, passed. Our supervisor called to find out where we could send flowers. Coworker's mom answered the phone. Supervisor said they were so sorry about her daughter's death. Mom was confused. Found out that Candy was actually the name of the coworker's horse, and the horse had passed away. Coworker was let go, and the supervisor said to us, I just couldn't trust someone who couldn't tell the difference between her sister and a horse. Story 95. Not my story, but a friend's. She worked for a company that had a small call center. Guy didn't hang up all the way after leaving a voicemail asking for donations. Left a lengthy message that detailed a blowjob he had recently received, whoever it was called in to complain. Management called him into their office. He sees Hutcher waiting. He stops in the doorway long enough to yell crap, and immediately runs. She said people saw him running across the lawn, parking lot, just left his stuff in his desk. Story 96. Complained about the taxes on his check to the boss, despite the boss having nothing to do with the taxes, and then broke the monitor on the punch and clock on his way out. Fired instantly. Story 97. President of one of my companies that actually ended up having to testify on Capitol Hill one time, got fired for having sex in the hallway with our CFO. Story 98. Putting a smiley face sticker directly on the camera lenses and smiling while placing it on, then stealing a bunch of crap, taking off the sticker and flipping it off. Story 99. A housekeeping guy was outside of the nursing home I work at when he sees a guy pull up in a Rolls Royce. Housekeeping guy says to the driver when he gets out, "What are you driving a Rolls for? Are you a substances dealer?" Turns out the driver was our doctor. Housekeeping guy was terminated. Employers have read it. What's the maddest you have ever been at an employee for something they've said or done? Did it result in their termination? Story 1. After more weeks of training than I should have been necessary. Charts, books, and explicit instruction. He ruined a 10,000 piece of equipment because he didn't load it correctly because it took too much time. He wasn't fired then and there. He was fired about 10 minutes later when I sent him to the boardroom to review the materials while I set up the replacement, and I found him in the CEO's office watching adult film. I didn't have the power to fire him, but I was so livid the words just flowed out of my mouth. Story 2. I worked at a convenience store and often fell into the role of supervisor, manager. My boss was on holidays when this happened. We had a fellow working one night when a customer brought in a $5,000 winning lotto ticket. First mistake, and completely against policy. He opened the safe and paid it. Nobody should know you can open the safe, especially when we worked alone at night. That should have been referred to the Lotto Corps to pay directly, or the owner could write a check. Second and worst mistake. There's little bits of paper you have to submit to the lotto folks when you pay a ticket, so your store gets the money paid back, less a fee. He threw the paper in the garbage, which then ended up in the huge dumpster that served both us and several apartment buildings. So if I don't find this piece of paper, my boss loses $5,000 and one or more of the employees might lose their job. I put bags over my shoes, grabbed a pair of dish gloves and a painter's mask, climbed a ladder, and hopped in the dumpster. I started ripping bags and trying to determine what day and where it came from. Just shy of 2 hours later, I emerged with that piece of paper, followed quickly by the longest shower of my life. The butthole responsible for my dumpster dive did not even say thank you. He was not allowed to work alone for some time thereafter, and he got epically chewed out when the boss came back. Story 3. I once had to train some new girls, who seemed to be friends, at a concession stand. In the space of about an hour, they demanded they be allowed to modify their uniform. Asked if they could use our cash registers to check social media sites. We're told that. Customers order food, you prepare that order. They decided that's too much work, and it'd be easier to make a bunch of random orders and serve them if they happen to get ordered. But new girls, if no one orders those things, that food goes to waste. If that happens, can we take it home with us? No. Disappeared into a storage room to check their phones and gossip. They hadn't been on duty for 20 minutes at this point. Had a popcorn fight. They just started screaming and throwing popcorn at each other while behind the counter. Were called into the manager's office and immediately fired. They threw popcorn at the manager and stormed out screaming about how they'd better get paid for all their work. I'm not sure they completed even 5 minutes of real work. Story 4. I work in a rental shop at a ski hill. Pretty chill job. Hook School groups up with skis and boots, wax customers' boards, and maintain our fleet. I have a staff of about 20 working under. I like the responsibility. About 2 years back, I hired this guy. Let's call him Cam. Cam seemed like a nice guy. Did well in the interview, knew a lot about our equipment, worked well with kids. He was a surefire hire. A few days before his first training shift, I started hearing some talk about him from other supers. The weekend before his first shift, he was at a party with his girlfriend. She worked ski patrol for us at the hill. I guess they got into an argument. Drinks were involved. One thing led to another, and he basically beat her. She spent overnight at the hospital making sure everything was in check. I had to let him go. It's better she feels safe at work and won't have to worry about being around him. Story 5. I was the assistant manager of a pizza chain. The manager hired an employee who I can only describe as a smelly moose. A big animal in your way that smells like fertilizer. He was our new delivery driver, and unfortunately, 2 days into the job, we caught a nasty rainstorm. He took it upon himself to pull the most half-assed attempt at faking a slip and fall while leaving the building that I swear you couldn't script it for Life Alert without landing $1 million deal. I saw the whole thing happen. Moose didn't see me. He fell by slowly lowering himself down onto his elbow, looking around for a witness to his crap show and crying out like he had just shattered his whole back. He immediately started chanting, "My arm, ow my arm, oh." So all us cooks piled around him and asked if he was okay as he was rolling all over the front entrance and all around making a scene. He finally gets up while holding his elbow like it had been shot by a bullet overseas and says he's fine and needs to take the night off. Okay, we say, and his mom comes to pick him up. Not 2 days later, we get slapped with a lawsuit asking that we pay for his shoulder surgery. It's a good thing that the owner lawyer ed up because that sob had hurt his shoulder years before, and they wanted money to help with hospital bills. Story 6. I manage a restaurant, and apparently, it's hard as duck to keep a dishwasher. The most memorable one stole a pig skull. It would have normally been thrown out after the chef took his customary photo, and she could have just asked for it, weird as it would have been. But she stole it and put it in her backpack, which was bulging. Employees' bags were checked by management before they left. I found the pig. Chef was mad. First person I ever fired. Story 7. Both of my nephews have worked for me from time to time, and both have had multiple screw-ups along the way. We'll call them J and N. J is my oldest brother's son. N is the second oldest brother's son. They are both in their early 28s. I have forgiven most of their transgressions, which have always been substances related in some way. But both of them, independent of each other, has done something that has made me so mad that I had to fire them. I eventually rehired one of them back, but he works with me only on the truck loading and unloading furniture so I can keep an eye on him. Jay had the most problems, but the final series of events that cost him his job started. When I gave him extra work filling in some weekend hours as a clerk in a small indoor flea market I used to own. First, he started using the cash drawer like his own little piggy bank. I told him several times that he had to stop taking out advances on his paycheck by pulling cash from the till. He would acknowledge the order, and then the next week he would go in when the shop was closed and pull cash from the drawer and leave an IOU in its place. It finally got so bad that the last week Jay took all the cash out of the drawer. We were only open on weekends, so that when he went on Friday to open, he had no money for making change. I had to make a special trip to bring cash out for the drawer, and as I approached the building, a group of the dealers pulled me aside and told me how Jay had more than once curled up on a piece of furniture and slept during open hours. And this wasn't one of your typical was up to late and dozed off nap, but a hardcore substance-induced coma from which the dealers could not wake him. To his credit, Jay admitted it was true, and quietly gave me his key before I asked for it. He eventually got so bad into substances that he once broke a woman's porch light fixture to get at the light bulb so he could turn it into some kind of pipe. My heart still hurts those few times I run into him at family functions. My other nephew, N, helps me on the truck most weeks, but when I opened up a new shop not too far from his house, I trained him to run it a few days each week. He was shy and not great at sales, but he was a body that would fill hours until I could find someone more permanent and put N back on the truck with me. Well, N's girlfriend is not the most reliable person on the planet, and she has a serious pill problem. But he loves her, and Lord knows I've dated some real doozies in my life, so who am I to judge? Well, it turns out I am the boss, so that gives me a little room to judge the behaviors of people who affect my business. It started when my landlord popped by one afternoon and asked what had happened the previous day. Naturally, I was confused by the question. The landlord mentioned how his daughter listens to the local police, firefighter radio, and there was a call from an ambulance to respond to an overdose at the business address. Shocked, I told him I had no idea what had occurred, and I called my nephew to check on him and see what had happened. I already knew in the back of my mind it was going to have something to do with his girl, and answers and tells me in a nonchalant way, "Oh yeah, I had to call an ambulance for my girlfriend. She was overdosing." My response was, "What the hell was she doing at my place of business taking substances?" He answered, "She wasn't taking substances. She was at my dude's house and started oding. I told him to bring her here to me. When I saw she was in bad shape, I called my mom and she told me to call the ambulance." Bear in mind, he is 21 years old, so I forgive him a lot of mistakes of youth. But that was a pretty bad one. I asked him, "Why did you not have the ambulance go to your dude's place and pick her up there?" I thought she was faking to get my attention. At this point, I'm pretty mad, but I need him to continue working for the next few days until I can find a clerk for the shop and get him back on the truck with me where I can watch him. I tell him that his girlfriend is not to come into the shop ever again. He agrees, and I let the whole thing go. Right up until the next time he works, 2 days later, when I pull up to my shop, and he is sitting outside in a car with his girl. She had rode over with him to my store at 10 in the morning and was hanging out the entire 8-hour day in front of my shop until he got off at 6. I ask him what she was doing there, and he responds, "She's outside, so it's not like she's in the shop," in a tone that little kids get when they think they found a flaw in an adult's logic. I took his key from him, fired him, for a week, at which point I cooled down and rehired him for menial labor, and have only let him work the truck ever since. There have been lots of other minor things here and there, and incidents involving other employees along the way. But for now, those two stories stick out in my "it's 2 in the morning, why ain't I asleep" mind. Story 8. I run a moderate IT department within a medium-sized company. We have 5 people for several hundred users. I had 2 people take vacation time at the same time. It's tight, but it happens and we deal with it a few years back. I had 2 people on vacation. One of my guys lost both of his parents in a car accident. He was out at the same time. 4th guy came down with pneumonia, so it was only me. I was starting to get a large backlog of issues, nothing serious, but very time-consuming, to say the least. I called a Yet employment agency that I've dealt with in the past and have always had great results. I called, they had a network tech here the next day. This guy seemed okay at first. I set up his temp account, sent him around for a few silly issues like mouse isn't working. I kicked out my plug and nothing works type of thing, which was fine. I had arranged from a friend to test out a few higher-end Zebra printers for barcode labels and such, so I sent him out to pick them up. Now, these printers around $1,000 each, give or take. Where I sent him to pick them up was 30 minutes away. In heavy night traffic, it is 45 minutes away. I asked him to pick them up, and he left at 10 a.m. He rolled back in the door at 4:45 p.m. I asked him where the hell he was. He said he stopped for lunch. Almost 7 hours for a 1.5-hour run. WTF? Well, I needed the help, so whatever. Next day, I asked him to move one of the Zebra printers to our testing area and connect it to the test network. Outside of my office door, I heard crash, 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 crash. I'm thinking, what the duck now? He was rolling the printer in the box down to the testing area. I just looked at him amazed that he can breathe on his own, and I yelled, "What the heck are you doing?" He looks back at me and says in a very nonchalant voice, "Well, they are heavy, so I was just rolling it. They are made of metal and stuff. Why are you mad?" So I just lost it. "Get the duck out. Get the duck out of my building, you git." He looks at me and says, "Did I do something wrong?" 4 loaner printers were broken. Yes, he rolled them in the building from the parking lot. Then at temp agency that I have been on good terms with for several years, picked up the cost to replace the printers. One more. I also ran another department, EDI, Electronic Data Interchange, which, when I inherited, was a friggin' tragedy. The people were a mess. The software and procedures were worse than that, but not by much. EDI, it should be for the most part fully automated, with EDI operators correcting silly mistakes, one-off error and such. That should be how it worked. This was EDI operators were processing all orders. Might as well have just translated the documents and given them to the order entry department. Nothing was automated at all. It is company policy, any employee that worked until after 7 p.m., the company would pick up dinner, which for the most part is a good policy. I spend the next several weeks upgrading the translator software in the EDI department, and each night I see this one employee, let's call him Muhammad because that is his name. Around 7 p.m., give or take 5 minutes, a food delivery was arriving from a very high-end steakhouse. I mean, by the delivery, it was 2 shopping bags of food. He would sign for it and walk out the door no later than 7:05 p.m. A few days of this, I went to the accounting department and asked about the dinner budget for my department. I wasn't working here when the budget was made the year before. She told me my department has spent approx. $45,000 on dinner 6 months into the fiscal year. We had a $5,000 budget on food, and the money was being taken out of hardware budget. I blew a gasket. I told her to give me the breakdown of who ordered what. A few hours later, she sent me an email. Muhammad had spent $43,000 on dinner. Everyone else was under $300 or so for the past 6 months. I yelled at her for not informing me of this, and it was time to talk with Muhammad. Just a little FYI, Muhammad's salary was $35,000 per year. I called him into my office first thing the next morning and asked him about all the damn food. He said to me, "Well, I stay until 7 p.m. every night, and I order dinner for myself, my wife, my brother, his wife, and all the kids so we can eat together every night." I asked him if he thought he was abusing the system. He laughed and said, "I just followed the rules. I wasn't told I could not do it, so I did it." I fired him on the spot and told him the cost of dinners. That was his severance package. He walked back to his desk and started yelling at me. Now, normally, I let crap like this go because of liability and it just doesn't bother me. But something snapped being, I yelled back at him across the bullpen of desks. "No, I fired you because you admitted to fraud. You have been stealing from the company every day for the past 6 months." He stormed out the door, yelling he was going to call a labor lawyer. Never heard from him or saw him again. Story 9. In my years working nights, first in hotels, then later in IT support, I trained some real winners. The room thief this guy trained with me and seemed solid, as many do. But once he started working on his own, he decided it was a good idea to smoke on the balcony behind our front desk office during his shift. They fired him when the morning crew had someone try to check out who wasn't in the system. It's an old trick. Log a room as a move, so there's a reason housekeeping has to clean it, and then rent the room for cash, which you pocket. It doesn't work if the guy staying comes to the desk to ask for an extension. The train drain this was in Calgary. Our owner bought another hotel in Vancouver and decided to bring in all the new staff to train with us. I trained his night lead for a couple weeks. Really got him doing the job well. Figured he'd be great at it. At the end of his last shift, he went up to his free room, packed his things, came down and checked out. He told me he'd found a better job in Calgary and decided to move here, shook my hand, and walked out. My GM was livid, woke me up with an angry phone call when he got in. But what was I supposed to do? Not let him leave? The streak. Boogity. I really liked working opposite this guy. See, I was 5 nights a week, and the other night guy would be 2 nights and 3 mornings or evenings. This dude was reliable, fun to talk to, got along with everyone, liked to go clubbing with the GM's daughter. Trouble is, he also liked to get drunk on his shift. Alberta residents might remember there was a big TELUS strike in the mid-00s. We had all the third-party security staying with us. This was long before the strike, but they knew it was happening. So these guys had a command center staffed 24-hour a day, 12-hour shifts, in our lower lobby opposite the pool. Great folks. I really appreciated having bored and burly people to help toss drunks. So our tipsy night guy, who had on occasion ordered massive stacks of pizza for these guards as a prank, real class act here, decided one night to go in the pool, it was closed after 11, with his boyfriend, skinny dipping. On his way out, he waved hello to the security guards and dropped his towel. Raymond, the useless goddamn. Okay, I'm still bitter about this one. I was working at help desk for the health region after the hotel era. Just me, from 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. 3 days on 3 days off. Later, they added an evening guy for 7:10 p.m., taking every password reset and crashed printer call from every nurse in a city of over 1 million people. No pressure. Job was sure as Beeson's. Don't duck around. But it was pretty slack most nights. So they gave me this guy to train. He was an African immigrant, so I figured, hey, cool. He's got new perspectives and cultural stuff to talk about, and he'll work hard because his family is still over there. Nope. I remember his name, Raymond, because it's like Rain Man. Because I think he was mentally handicapped. He wasn't friendly at all, which made it awkward to sit together for 12 hours at a time. He had 0 retention, so I had to hold his hand through absolutely everything. He had a super thick accent, so he was useless on the phone. And he asked me to print Google Maps to locations in the city where he was interviewing for other jobs. I wrote a very diplomatic letter stating that leaving him alone at my station all night would be a mistake. The same day, the other night guy, who was filling my opposite shift until a trainee could be found, wrote a letter threatening to throw him off the balcony. We worked on the 6th floor of a building with an interior courtyard. Funny thing about outsourced corporate help desks, they have a hell of a time firing people. They had to build a huge case to justify it. So Rayman got shifted to days, working only via email because he was still crafty on the phone. It took forever for them to can his useless ass. Hash the slacker, I had a trainee at the hotel who lasted 1 shift. He told me he didn't like being up at night, and he didn't like doing paperwork. I gently explained that this job entailed staying up all night and doing the nightly audit paperwork, and not much else. I have no idea why he even applied. The absentee assistant hotel again. My night manager, basically the guy who does everything that's not the front desk, had to pick up some keys from someone in a totally different neighborhood and ditched on me. I guess he was doing landlord crap on the side or something. I wouldn't have minded if he'd done it late at night, but he did it early when the bar was still open and out regulars were sitting at the VLT's digital slot machine, pissing away their money. Anyone who won any amount over $10 would need him to get the money from the safe. They were livid at having to slow down or stop on those machines, and it was the end for him. The duck this, quit, not fired, but I had a really solid night manager who I worked with for a long time decide out of nowhere to leave one night. He called me from a room in the hotel, said, sorry, but duck this place. Again, the VLT patrons had to stop wasting money until my desk manager could haul his tired ass in. Story 10. Not an employer, but I was the charge nurse on duty. One of the new graduate nurses injected cough syrup with codeine in a woman's IV. She called me, hysterical. When I got to the unit, the patient was short of breath. I called the rapid response team, and she was transferred to ICU. When the team arrived, the nurse was too hysterical to answer their question, and I had to pull everything I could from her chart. After the patient was taken to ICU, I asked the nurse how this happened. She said she was too stressed out to realize what she was doing. There are a lot of problems with this response. First, if you need help, it's okay to ask. Second, we are required to double-check that we have the right patient, right medication, right route, right dose, right time. Third, I felt bad for her because she was obviously sorry about it, but I felt like she needed more training. The hospital decided not to give her more training, and instead wrote her up and kept her on the schedule. Story 11. Had to manage a bunch of contractors cabling the building. We had 12 of them. They were just a bunch of guys. No experience required. Who applied first? Since we needed them urgently, no real interviews been conducted. One of them was caught stealing food from employee fridge. He did it for a week. He would even open boxes and taste what's inside before choosing the right once the other one left for a smoke and returned 6 hours later. His excuse was that he suddenly decided to buy an iPhone and went to the city to do so. Story 12. This is simple, but has to be done this exact way, so here is the instruction page. Follow these 4 steps exactly. Now let's practice a few times. Asterisk, practiced a few times, asterisk. Okay, great, show me how to do it. Demonstrate steps. Do you have any questions about how to do this? Employee, no, I'm good. Okay, cool. And if you get lost, just grab this page and follow these steps. Employee, yeah, no problem. 2 weeks later, discover a huge problem. Why was this done this way? Employee, oh, well, I didn't really know how to do it. Grabs page, you followed these steps. And anyways, you demonstrated it and told me you were good to do it. Why didn't you bother to pull out this page or ask for more help? Employee, oh, well, I didn't want to look like I didn't know what I was doing. But you clearly didn't know. I almost slapped her. Follow the 4 ducking steps in front of you. Story 13. My dad found out that his secretary had racked up over $45,000 in legal bills from emailing simple questions to a lawyer she was told not to talk to unless she asked my dad. He was very calm and wrote a nice email to her. She didn't get the memo. Her response was along the lines of, "Whoa, you pay your lawyer that much? I think I deserve a raise." Story 14. Took a customer's vehicle, a built 73 Corvette, out for a test drive after fixing the water pump on it. It was his first week of working for me. That car was a good buddy of mine's. My buddy worked at the local drag strip. He was not happy when he saw his own damn car with his name signed on the roof pull up to make a pass. He told the guy in tech to not let it pass, and he called me. I showed up and watched my buddy confront him about why his car was at the strip. Then I walked out of the office and told the guy he could find his own ride back home and that he no longer had a job. Banana move? Maybe. Was I damn proud of myself? Hell yeah. Not sure what the idiot was thinking. Taking a car with a guy's name on it and a sticker for the drag strip to that drag strip. Talking to the guy whose name is on the roof. I don't think he quite understood how guys work. Within the week, every mechanic around us had heard about what happened, and I heard the guy applied for a job at another shop like a month later. I doubt he was hired. Story 15. CEO decided to outsource data, content management of our central product list for our flagship product, to some ducking crap brick outsource team from India, because they do the same work for pennies on the dollar. We kept 2 original staff on board because they'd managed to turn a 5E before this crap decision. The rest of the local US-based contractors were all let go. Happy Thanksgiving, guy. I was annoyed by the fact that it took 10 ducking weeks to ramp them up. Guys, you ducking Google the ducking crap, you find a match, you copy pasta, and go to the next one. Whoopity. I was perturbed by the fact that my 2 on-site US staff outperformed ducking 10 of these guys from overseas. I was real ducking. Irritated that the results were super ducking shoddy and basically required my 2 guys to go over all their work once they turned it in, which was all right in the end, I suppose, because they were so ducking slow that it wasn't a huge body of work anyway. But the clincher was when some knuckleheaded dip crap ducked up the FTP upload and completely overwrote the master file with his half-assed result set of half a dozen records out of thousands, then downloaded the backup and ducked that up too. Fortunately, their manager had been saving virtually every copy of every spreadsheet ever from the dawn of time in a local backup on his machine in some pseudo-organized fashion that made no sense to no man, including himself. The duck-up occurred on a Wednesday. They confessed on a Friday, meaning my on-site staff basically wasted 2 days. Then, as the manager is explaining the duck-up, he says, "But I have to go now because I have to catch my bus, but I will talk on Monday." No, dude. I have a presentation on Monday. Actually, we have a presentation on Monday. You need to stay on the phone. Catch the next bus. But this is the last bus. Oh my God. I can call you tomorrow? In the meantime, I will send you my notes and you can review today, so we're prepared to review tomorrow. So he calls the next day and I'm having a pint with my friend. He begins the phone call with, "Hello, it is Samir, and how are you today?" "Well, Samir, I was actually hoping to go to the coast today and enjoy a day with my family, but my boss decided to hire some idiot who wrecked the file I've been working on for the last year, and he's too stupid to read his own notes, so I have to throw away my weekend cleaning everything up. So I'm actually in a pretty crafty ducking mood right now, but, switch to a saccharine, sweet sing-song voice. How are you?" He kind of stammered and apologizes. We cleaned up the mess. You can bet I threw him the duck under the bus during our Monday presentation. The CEO eliminated the contract after the presentation, and we picked up a couple more American kids by the end of the month. Ducking outsourcing, man. Never again. Story 16. Just this month, I've had $800 worth of repairs at my store due entirely to 2 employees who don't like the change of management. I'm new and take my crap seriously. The guy, ma'am, the girl. Wesley Snipes broke my damn sink. Or I'm mixing up famous black people. $250 for drain snaking, $150 for new pipes under employee sink, $120 for a shelf that EM sat on, $316 for new faucet hand, and some weird part that was destroyed by parachute pants. Let me preface this by adding that EF, a semi-attractive, fully giddy female employee, was the object of the following guy's affection. She was the bad influence that started the whole ordeal. M somehow was introduced to the idea that the drains, which are constantly receiving a trickle of water during operation hours, are a great place to jam spoon, and sticks and change from the register and literally everything that would fit into the opening. I once found a baseball in the drain basin. Oh, by the way, the drain is on the floor in an enclosed area that is ridiculously hard to open, and M's IQ is just shy of 70. Anyway, $250 to snake the drains. They're linked under the floor, and if one gets clogged, the other's likely to be clogged as well. We pulled up 17 spoons, a couple knives, which is weird, we don't even have those, an envelope, a whole crap load of receipts, some bottle caps, and some rubber bands. Basically, just crap we have around for other things. So during the snaking, the guy also gets crap everywhere, and M refuses to clean it up because it's not my job. Literally 15 seconds later, I showed him our employee manual and his signature on the last page saying that, yeah, that's your job. That alone wasn't really enough to terminate M. The cameras are all pointed at high traffic areas and expensive machines, not drains. He could have been cleaning them every time he bent down with a spoon, stick, whatever. Good news, though. My troubles were over after we had a very productive talk. Not M also decided drains love rags. We use a foot rag to disinfect, sanitize, and clean up pretty much everything in the store. M didn't like cleaning the store, so our rags would occasionally disappear, as in sometimes 3 or 4 a day. M also didn't like washing his hands. His excuse was that the sink was clogged. It was fine the previous morning I used it. This would have gotten him off my staff immediately, but he wore single-use gloves, which isn't great, but it does meet bare minimum requirements, and I'd make him wash every time I saw him. It should also be noted that at this point, I was desperate for staff. Lo and behold, a bunch of our missing rags managed to make their way into the drain. I don't think I can adequately communicate that this is impossible. The drain cover in this sink is the same sheet of metal as the rest of the sink, not a removable piece. On top of that, the holes are tiny, about 5 mm in diameter. How in the hell M managed to cram 5 rags into a 5-ish ME hole is beyond me. We had another talk in which I gave him a week to get his crap together or get the duck out. Not with those words, of course. A few days later, our 3-compartment sink started to leak. Slowly at first, so I tightened some things and it stopped. But every day it would start up again, and I was running out of bits to tighten. I looked on the cameras, and M was taking a hammer to the faucet. It took 3 or 4 hours of skimming the video files to find, and it happened in under 10 seconds. Customer comes in, buys their stuff, leaves, hammer time. Another customer comes in, buys stuff, stays, eats, leaves, and then hammer time. After all was said and done, M called and apologized. But I refused to rehire him, so he asked if he could write up a paper and have me sign it, so he could show his next employer, basically an informal letter of recommendation. I said no, but he signed my name anyway. I only know that last part because he forgot to change, remove my phone number and email, and the new employer called me. He, is currently unemployed. Crap, I didn't mean to write a novel. Also, I feel like an ass after reading all my words, but I put a bunch of effort into it already, so I'm posting anyway. Story 17. I run a recruitment, headhunting agency in Sydney. One of my business developers cites there in a meeting with one of the largest marketing automation companies in the world and starts spilling a few secrets of their competitors whom we also ducking work for. I have preferred supplier agreements with both, and this idiot thought it was okay to share this specific piece of information with the competition. I asked him, please leave the meeting. The director I was speaking to could tell I livid and agreed not to act on the information. I had to call the other client and explain what happened. Explained this would change the relationship as he could tell I was being honest about everything. Say clients are now exclusively mine and my business partners. Story 18. I was night manager at a gas station at 19, and my boss hired a git for me to train. I swear he cared more about his appearance in his blue jumpsuit than doing any real work. On the phone with his crew most of the shift. Cars lined up at full serve while he was inside checking his hair. One night I came in to close the store, only to find it closed an hour before we actually close. He had a party at the station and was dancing on the roof of his car, holding a wine cooler in his hand while talking on his phone. Like 20 of his friends all there dancing to loud crap music, while customers were honking for service. I fired him on the spot and kicked everyone out and opened the store back up to finish the shift, offering free coffee to customers who were inconvenienced. My boss sees me at work the next day and says I had no right to fire the git, lets him keep his job with only a written warning, and writes me up for giving away free coffee and wanted to dock it off my pay. I quit at the end of my shift and was told I could use them as a reference if I wanted, as I was a good worker. First reference call he got from my new job, he told them, Fulgrim 26 has a problem following authority and makes his own rules. Story 19. Not an employer, but was the manager. I had a crush on an employee. Typical starving artist, pseudo-intellectual git. I really loved that type in my 20 AS. I was covering someone's shift, and he was the next on to relieve me. He came in 4 hours late. Drunk. His excuse was he'd been watching World Cup with a bunch of French people, and they won. This was years ago, so the champagne started pouring, and it would have been rude to leave. I had to be held back by 2 employees because I tried to crawl over the counter to strangle him. In my defense, this was my 16th day on and was supposed to have been my first day off before Idiot 1 called out sick and Idiot #2 came in drunk. Ended up working till close, 16 hours, and another 12 days straight. Story 20. I was the boss at a mid-sized nonprofit for a time. I got thrust into the job out of necessity, and I hired an accountant to run the books, or so I thought, at the recommendation of a lawyer friend of mine. I was very hands-on with a lot of other projects, and basically just wanted to make sure our books were in order. So a few months after hiring the guy, he comes into work driving a brand new $170,000 Maserati. Keep in mind, we are in a very small market, and there's only 2 other Maserati owners in the area, and I know both of them, and they're millionaires. So I complimented him on his new car, and he replies sharply, "Thanks, I think I've earned it." Fast forward about a year or so, and he shows up to work one day in a McLaren. I thought that was very odd, as I lived in San Fran for 2 years and never once saw a McLaren. The following day, he showed up in a Porsche Panamera. After that, I decided to put some fail-safes in place to start recording his keystrokes and all activity with our books. After a few months of tracking, I realized he had drawn up a contract and forged my signature to guarantee him a company car of his choosing every year. Keep in mind, I made a salary of $120K a year, and his was less than that, and I drive an Audi A5. Then I found out he had been hiring himself to do the company taxes at a cost of $25,000 per district, 3 in all. A little more digging with the help of a tax lawyer friend, and I discovered he had been writing himself $20,000 checks every month for office supplies. That was it for me. Fast forward a few months, and he shows back up in Maserati. Also had found out he got his wife a brand new Porsche a few weeks prior. I had enough evidence to confront him at this point, and had informed the board of what I had planned to do. I flat out asked him if he was stealing money, to which he flatly denied. He said he was 100% legit. I asked him how in the world could he possibly afford a $300,000 McLaren, a $180,000 Maserati, and a $90,000 Porsche for his wife, and he said it was because he was good at his job. I then produced 13 of the canceled checks for $20,000 office supplies, and he went white as a ghost. I had a local police sergeant on standby, and I told him he was going to jail, and he was going to have reimbursed the company for about $2.7 million, which was close to the total of the amount he embezzled. He got sick and went to the bathroom, and I called my cop friend. As I wanted the incident to be quiet and not draw negative attention to the company, he fled out the window of the bathroom. I heard his Maserati fire up, and he was gone like a fart in the wind. 4 weeks later, all of the executives and board members received tax audits from the IRS. Turns out, in addition to being a corporate embezzler, he was also a rat for the IRS. He fled the country, and if we catch him, he's going to jail. Not to mention, most of the money he stole was taxpayer money. Story 21. I used to manage a gas station, convenience store. I started my day at 5 a.m. and had a second shift person call out, so I was stuck there till 10 p.m., or so I thought. About 30 minutes before my third-party person was supposed to start, he also called out. I was stuck there for a total of 23 hours without a single break before a manager from another store came in to relieve me. Before I left, I called my regional manager and told him and his company to go duck themselves, and I quit. Story 22. Not a manager or anything. This person was my equal, but apparently I had to babysit. Anyway, working fast food, we have all these little procedures to minimize the amount of cash in the till in case we are robbed. 50, 100 notes do not go in the till ever. Person working the register has been there for over a month, so not particularly watching. He yells out, "What do I do with $100 note?" They're very rarely used in house. I yell back, same as $50, meaning it does not go into the till. So this person brings it up on the register as $50, gives change for a $50, then gets pissed off at the customer who is demanding another $50 in change. The ducking tries to blame me. Story 23. I spent 6 years as an assistant manager in a couple of different movie theaters, and I have some stories I could tell. We had a particularly unreliable employee during my tenure there, whom I shall refer to as Jack. Jack was an accomplished Bunbury. He allegedly had a grandmother in very poor health, who would be on her deathbed at least once a month. It was usually, incidentally, on a Friday or Saturday night. By the time the weekend was over, she would make a miraculous recovery and be ready to die again in a few weeks. One Friday payday, I'm the opening manager and Jack comes in to pick up his check. This is 2009. and swine flu was in the news a lot at this. 2 hours after showing up to collect his paycheck, Jack calls in sick. He spoke to me, the very manager that had given him his paycheck earlier in the day, and told me he was too sick to work and that he's pretty sure he has swine flu. I guess he finally decided it was time to retire the dying grandmother routine. Asterisk. I told him he had 3 options. Get your shift covered, get a doctor's note, or show up and let us send him home. He told me he would try to get his shift covered, but that he was too sick to leave home so he couldn't go to a doctor or drive 10 minutes to work. Jack was literally telling me he was too sick to see a doctor. Jack opted to do none of these 3 things. He just didn't show up. I told the closing manager when he came in that he would be short-staffed because Jack called in sick, saying he had swine flu just 2 hours after getting his paycheck. The closing manager looked at me sternly and said, "I just saw Jack donating plasma today. There's this place around here you can go to donate plasma, and they'll give you money for it. A lot of poor college kids, part-time workers, will supplement their income by selling their blood to make medicine." We called Jack to confront him. It went to voicemail. The following day, another employee came to us and said that Jack had called him trying to get his shift covered, claiming to have swine flu. He had declined since he'd already made plans. Later that night, he had seen Jack at a local bar. This was all we needed. We compiled a list of all Jack's missed shifts, ranging from dying grandma to swine flu, and submitted them to Har. Har terminated Jack for being a liar, unreliable, failing to arrive for his scheduled shifts, and being a general asshat. Story 24? Not employer, but was a manager. 2 of the sales girls got into a screaming match with curses flying right in front of a lobby full of customers. They didn't get fired because the owner doesn't give a duck about anything, and I didn't have the power to veto him. Story 25. I'm a wedding club DJ and was once training a new guy for my brother's DJ business. I pick him up and we head to the wedding. Once there, we start loading in the gear. He takes in 1 light bag, then takes the liberty to start taking selfies in front of the head table while I lug the rest of the gear in. We start background music while waiting for guests to arrive, and I give him the rundown on the formalities of weddings and how the DJ should act. He nods and seems to understand, so I proceed to teach him about the equipment. The guests start pouring in while Rick, the DJ in training, is making his first live blend. Success. He seems to be getting the hang of it, so I give him his first test, and I make a bathroom trip, asking him to play the next song for me. I think it was some John Mayer song. So I get as comfortable as possible with my badly timed daily poop in a public place and listen for the transition. Then I hear it, that all too recognizable beat. That dumb Mento brain starts playing Shake That by Eminem, explicit version. I quickly wipe and run out, hoping that the people there took it as a joke. But it was obvious the damage that had been caused as soon as I got within sight of the DJ table. There was the father of the bride hitting my mixer, trying to stop the song while one of the groomsmen had the frightened newbie, Rick, up against the wall. I run over and apologized profusely, explaining that he was a trainee and that he will leave immediately. They accept my apology as they didn't have much choice unless they wanted a silent wedding. I tell Rick to go the hell home, and he gets all pissed off saying that he was just trying to impress me by filling the dance floor early. The wedding went great for the rest of the night, and I shared an awkward laugh with the room about it as the McKee brought it up at speech time. Needless to say, at around 12 p.m., Shake That, clean version, filled the floor. Never spoke to Rick again, though. Story 26. I had to manage a Target cafe one year because our manager had a stroke. Anyway, one tool would not wash anything. I'd go to Pan Pizzas and find the pans on the shelf were slimy with grease, gelatinous bread and cheese mixtures, and smelled like death every time I worked after him. I'd tell him to do his crap, get upper management in, but they didn't give a crap. So he'd go back to watching his anime on his PSP instead of working. He was the laziest ducking piece of crap I ever had the misfortune to meet, and they would not fire him. Oh, seriously, he caused us to have bad health scores. It still makes my skin crawl. I caught him throwing pans in the trash instead of washing them before our manager finally came back. Bless that man. He immediately barred that jackass from our area and crawled up the upper management's holes about not supporting me. It's been 4 years, and I still hate that git with every fiber of my being. Story 27. When I used to work in a truck stop, I came as close as I ever did to firing someone on the spot. If you've ever been around truckers or a truck stop, you'll notice that it can be a pretty diverse lot. It's good money for those willing to do it, which includes a ton of immigrants. In my time, I had dealt with tons of people from Southeast Asia, India, the Middle East, and Eastern Europe. By and large, they were great people and caused us the least amount of trouble. I always used to joke around with one of our regulars who was from India that he was torturing us when he would warm up the food his wife would pack for him in our microwave. Some of the stuff he had was amazing and would make you hungry just from the smell. We had hired a new cashier, and from the beginning, I had the feeling she wouldn't last, but I'd give her a chance. A week or so later, while working on some crazy thing for an upcoming VIST from higher-ups, she made a snide remark over our radios that we wore, but the word I stopped listening at was raghead. See, we all wore radios with earpieces to make communicating back and forth easier. The two other truck stops at our exit used the same system, and occasionally you could hear them. Also, every district manager in our company and all senior management had them, as did our secret shoppers, so this was a huge deal. I pulled her in the office and told her in no uncertain terms was she to use that term, or any other term like it over the radio or in person again, or she would be out the door with no questions asked. This was her only warning she'd get on that. She ended up pulling a no-show next week on the store manager, and with what I had told him about the radio incident, when she did call in the next day, he told her to find new employment. Story 28. An assistant manager was fired for constantly talking crap about everyone in the lobby in front of all the parents. She was in her 40s, but treated the front lobby like the high school drama queen's lunch table, even rolling her eyes after being asked to stop gossiping or complaining about life so much. I worked at a clothing store, and the manager noticed missing stock. She informed everyone on staff about it. After a week, things continued to go missing. It had to be an inside job because the merchandise going missing were new items that weren't on the floor yet. She checked everyone's employee lockers and found one guy had put the missing underwear in his locker during his shifts. He'd most likely leave wearing it when he changed out of his employee outfit. Immediate fire. Story 29. I knew a guy who got fired on the spot. He was a real know-it-all conspiracy guy, smug in his belief that he's the smartest guy in the room, but can't hold a job at a gas station. So he was working at a gas station, and someone spilled some diesel around one of the pumps. His boss asks him to come help clean it up. He uses going outside as an excuse to light up a cigarette. Boss tells him to put out the cigarette. They are at a gas pump, cleaning up spilled diesel. In a puddle, they are both now standing right over. Know-it-all knows diesel won't light because of a cigarette, so he flings the cigarette into the puddle to prove his point. Now he was correct, and the diesel didn't light. But there are still some things you don't duck around with, and you don't risk 2 lives because of something you saw on Mythbuster. Boss fired him on the spot. Story 30. Was meeting my crew to go on a new job out of town and had to wait 45 minutes on a new hire. He got in my vehicle for the trip, and the first thing he tells me was he just did a dine and dash. When I asked where it was a place I went to a lot, I asked what the waitress looked like and knew who she was. I asked him where he lived and told him that I used to live around the corner and what his address was. I drove the thieving ducker straight home and called him a piece of crap and kicked him out. On the way out of town, I stopped by the restaurant and gave her his per diem. Story 31. I got 2 right now who I can't fire because we're in a hiring freeze and I can't replace them. One is where does it say that guy and the other is won't stop arguing guy. Won't stop arguing guy, Bosag, is a great worker, but sometimes feels like we should do things one way and refuses to listen to any alternatives. He'll just decide that the best way to do a task and any attempts to explain why we're doing it another way. Company policy, legal considerations, the laws of physics completely fail to change his mind. And every time the subject is brought up, he wants to start the whole argument over again. Like this is the first time it's occurred to him that we should do things differently. I just repeat, your opinion has been duly noted. Thank you. Over and over again. Sometimes he'll send me a long email detailing all the reasons we should do a task in a certain way, and I'll roll my eyes, count to 10, pretend this is the first time he's emailing me about the subject, and reply, your opinion has been duly noted. Thank you. The other guy sucks in every way imaginable as a human being, but is halfway decent at his job, so I can't even discipline. Where does it say that guy is always questioning me every time I forward a memo from corporate or ask him to complete a task or give him instructions? But I thought company policy said XYZ. It doesn't. But isn't it a law that ABC? After I check with legal and with HR and with Google. No, there isn't. You can't tell me to do that. It isn't in my job description. Yes, I can, and yes, it is. Oh, and he says this all with a little smirk on his face. Haha, thanks to this little crap, I'm now an expert in our employee handbook. I'm just waiting to bust him on a violation so I can progressively discipline his ducking face. In the meantime, I just try to hide from these 2 duck sticks for the sake of my blood pressure. Story 32. Ooh, I have a semi-relevant story. Used to work in a body shop. Waterborne paint was the hip new thing. We bought a new spray booth for around $50,000, including installation and shipping and stuff. The manager of the installation team was a total ducking idiot. Supposedly, he'd been working this job for a while and was trusted with running the operation. In the week that he was here, everything he did wrong. I could go into great detail about his shenanigans. But for the sake of keeping things short, the tipping point was when he dropped a $20,000 computer-controlled air conditioner, airflow module from 10 feet up, damn near on top of one of his own guys. Then he tried to tell us that it was still okay, even though we could clearly see damage. My boss had a lengthy discussion with the boss of the guy, and I have a feeling he's no longer employed. A new crew was brought in and finished the job with no issues at all.